So let's look a little bit more into Atlantis. What made Atlantis so important was this ancient serpent knowledge that they contained there. And this knowledge had been targeted by the eagle, led by powerful armies of the Romans much later on. And the reason for that was the truth behind the fact that Poseidon was the great creator of Atlantis. He's the great founder of Atlantis. And that's why the serpent knowledge goes all the way back to him and his son Thoth. Because when Atlantis was destroyed, that serpent knowledge had to be protected. So we have to look into retracing the steps of the serpent and those who have protected its knowledge. And we find if we look back at this legacy of the serpent, we find that it always goes back to Enki and his son named Ningshita. And now Ningshita is someone that I want you to remember because he had many important incarnations here, using these human avatar hosts, such as Thoth in Egypt, Enoch to the Gnostics, Hermes to the Greeks, and especially, and most importantly, Jesus, which we talked about just a second ago, was of course crucified with the Romans. So once you think back on that, look at the sheer brutality they had against the Christians, with, of course, was kind of being led by Jesus and his teachings. And that tells you why they were trying to stomp them out and destroy them before they could ever get out and pass there. And they were stopped essentially at that point and lost for so long until they kind of just now started to come back. So much has been lost from our earlier time period. And there's only these small fragments that still remain. Much of the serpent knowledge, like Rex mentioned earlier, there's still some dragon and serpent knowledge that's extensive throughout Asia, in places like China and Japan. But the most extensive evidence we still have for stone monuments and writings comes from Mesoamerica. That's where we can really see that the serpent knowledge reigned for years and years and years until it was finally destroyed. So the reason behind these teachings of Atlantis and the serpent knowledge of Mesoamerica was that when Atlantis was destroyed, that serpent knowledge needed to go somewhere. And largely that's how the civilizations of Thoth were then created in Mesoamerica, to kind of honor and then carry on what was lost from Atlantis. So let's go a little bit deeper in here.
I really like that guy's hat.
Oh yeah, so this might be really kind of familiar to a lot of people. You know, a lot of people may be familiar if you live in the United States or a lot of other parts of the world, down through Mexico and South America, of having a plumed serpent or like a plumed headdress or just any kind of a feathered headdress on their head. And the most important thing that I need to recognize here is that this is an example of information and knowledge that's been misrepresented, because I throughout all of my time until just within learning about this, thought that the feathers on Native Americans shared all throughout the United States, down through Mexico and down through Central America and South America, was based on the eagle and the bird. But what it actually represented was the plumed serpent. And that's why a second ago I showed this. These statues all throughout Mesoamerica simply represented the plumed serpent. And if you think about what a plumed serpent is, it's simply just a dragon. And so that's how they use all of these things, these symbols as metaphors, and we just simply don't get it. We think, oh, there's nothing like that that looks like that. It's crazy. Whereas these cultures were thinking way ahead of us, and they're trying to show metaphors to explain what they were trying to say. So these teachings and grand civilizations that were created by Thoth in order to resurrect what had been lost from Atlantis, they were only later corrupted by the eagle through war and blood sacrifice. We have to strongly consider all throughout history these native civilizations of the Americas, which became the stronghold of the plumed serpent. And then remember, the conquistadors of the mighty Spanish Empire that then conquered simultaneously the north to the south of all of these cultures. And I want you to remember that. Because the real meaning behind these native headdresses, as I talked about, it always extends back to the plumed serpent and the winged dragon. It has nothing to do with the eagle. That was simply what was stolen from them. And the flag of Mexico, to me, is one of the best examples still shown in the world. Because if you look at the history of Mexico and how those civilizations by Thoth were created in Tenochtitlan and Teotihuacan, you then see that when Cortez landed and then they conquered them, the eagle was able to conquer the serpent. And that's how their flag was able to eventually mean that. And unfortunately, most Mexicans don't know that. If they did, they probably wouldn't be as happy celebrating it. Huh. So the truth can really be found by looking at some of these ancient flags. In my book, The Illusion of Us, I talk about how a great veil has been placed over much of society, creating a false narrative of our history by controlling the information of the past and our purpose. That's how I was saying all of these symbols have been inverted and been made to believe the opposite of what they really are. Because if we knew the truth of what these symbols and teachings and all of these things meant, we would find out the real truth of everything. That's what they're trying to hide. Because it really does create what we think of as the Matrix. By holding back the truths of history, they're able to control what we think of the events of the past and kind of allow kind of this trained subconscious to attack anything that doesn't fit this predetermined model of what they give everybody through, this collective curriculum that's given through school. So what would happen if society learned that the great gods of the eagle were simply using civilizations as a means to settle ancient family disputes, with the ultimate cost of being the blood of hundreds of millions of human beings throughout history? And I mean, right here, the image of the Romans. Just think of the image of the Romans and how many countless civilizations they conquered and destroyed, being run by the eagle right above it. We have to strongly consider why the dragon and serpent has been made to be perceived as evil all throughout history, whereas the eagle was a sign of freedom to us. Remember that. The hard truth that we're going to understand is that nearly all of these things have been inverted to the opposite. And then we kind of, if you think that way, you kind of figure it out if you objectively look at it. One of the greatest pieces I have for understanding this was in Manly P. Hall's Secret Teaching of All Ages. In the story of Poimandres, you learn that the dragon actually represents the great mind and consciousness of the universe. So back to the creator of all. Hence the polluted term of God, the real God, being mankind's immortal teacher and guide. So that's when you start to put that together, you see why the serpent and the plumed serpent, the serpent and the plumed leading to the dragon has been demonized and inverted, because it ultimately connects back to what the real God is, and not how Enlil and his forces have pretended that they were God all along. These great beings of Yahweh and Jehovah in the Bible are, of course, not actually God, but Enlil and his family mimicking that they are God to control and enslave humanity. Many important teachings have been inverted, like the number 13 being entrenched us. And by the way, tomorrow is Friday, number 13th. So remember that tomorrow. Number 13th has been entrenched in us to be unlucky. And everyone thinks that way. So whenever it comes around, people don't want to talk about it, or they stay home because something might happen to them. And the amazing thing you'll learn is if you read through the Mayan codexes and you read through the Emerald Tablets, you'll find out that the number 13, if you add up all the different dimensions of what they consider, actually represented the domain of the creator of all. So it was the creator of all's number for 13. And that's simply how, another one of these examples of how things have been inverted to what they really are. And my favorite example that's been inverted would be the great Sumerian god known as Isis, who was known as Ninhursag or Ninmah. And if you look through history and you look through the evidence, you'll read that she was the fertility goddess of mankind, kind of the mother of mankind. And you get the word mother from her name. So we got the name mother from her. So here you have what we should be considering the ultimate female that we should be worshiping, our great mother. And instead, it's been completely inverted to mean this orchestrated terrorist group that runs around Syria that's been propped up to kind of both instill fear and also destroy the remnants of the past. known as, of course, known as ISIS, and I don't like to use that name for them. But these hired mercenaries of the Eagle are starting to be exposed now and taken down. But they have run through Syria, and we have lost so many ancient Sumerian tablets and writings that they've destroyed. And just like these ancient armies of the past, with the burning of Library of Alexandria and all these other places that were destroyed, it's simply just a means to destroy the serpent knowledge. Nothing has changed from that.
That reminds me of why the native cultures have probably been systematically destroyed, because of their ancient knowledge.
It's the serpent knowledge, exactly. Huh. If you can look at those cultures all across the Americas. One of the things we looked at in the Anunnaki series was that, being the god name of Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan and Amaru, they're all the same god. They're all just Thoth. So if you think about that, you say, okay, they're all created with the same Atlantean knowledge. That's why they were all systematically run through and destroyed after by the Eagle. So if we look at this correlation for thousands of years, we see the Eagle running our civilizations and cultures and societies. Of course, and that's run under Enlil's side of the family, and they've been battling based on their ancient disagreements that they've always had between each other. The idea that they don't like how mankind is run, and so they fight to have it run a certain way. And the Eagle is during this time of Pisces, during this zodiacal period, has of course been able to run and control the entire our civilizations for so long, and that's why they've been the way they have.
Do you think things are changing now?
Yeah, well, as we enter the time of Aquarius, that's why they've been repeatedly trying to start World War III, but they've been not able to, and that's because they're not the Eagle is no longer in control anymore. Now, here's my favorite representation, Rex. Goes way back to the Garden of Eden, where the famous story everyone knows, that we're told that the serpent tempts Adam and Eve with knowledge of good and evil, or the freeing of their consciousness, and that this great gift is imparted by the serpent. And yet in the modern Bible and religion, it's taught that the serpent is the devil and that it's tempted with evil things and it's portrayed as evil. But just like all those other things, go ahead.
Let me jump in, because I've actually read through the Nag Hammadi treaties. I brought this up before, but in the secret book of John, which is a lot less tainted than the majority of the biblical records people have access to, it's just as old. It has a completely different spin on the serpent. The serpent actually tries to help Eve. The serpent is trying to protect Eve from the archons, and it's just incredible. Isn't
that amazing? And you just mentioned, you were talking about the Nag Hammadi library and the Book of Enoch, and these are writings that I'm about to go over in a minute here. But those are the pure serpent teachings that were being targeted. That was the whole point of them trying to rid those, so that they wouldn't be around anymore to ever come up, so that no one could ever find the truth of any of this. When Atlantis was destroyed from cataclysms and deluges, I mentioned that this knowledge traveled to all the places across the world that had this knowledge back to the stars and the serpent. And of course, the most famous is in Egypt with the Great Pyramids. But it's all throughout the world where it spread across. And so we just look at places like Mesoamerica, and we find the strongest evidence back to the serpent. This is in Chichen Itza, and you can see this was the god Kukulkan, who I mentioned was the same god back to the Mayas. But you can also trace this back to the Hopi and Puebla of the United States, and then all the way down to the Inca, which had the god Amaru in South America. I mentioned this before, but I want to bring it up again because it's important. The Aztec god was known as Quetzalcoatl, and the Mayan god was known as Kukulkan. But if you look at the evidence for both of those, is that you can see strong correlations that they were the same being. They were simply Thoth in different incarnations. And if you see that, and then you follow this serpent, this is an Aztec representation right here, and what I just showed a second ago, this is a Mayan representation. You can see it's the same serpent all the entire time being represented, and that's how you follow it all throughout history. And all these incarnations of Thoth were because he took on. You can read about how in the Emerald Tablets he decided instead of having an eternal life of the gods in heaven, he would stay behind and be mankind's eternal teacher until the days of darkness of Pisces had passed. And that's why the Hermetic writings and all of these teachings of the serpent have been trying to be protected in so many of these cultures. You can destroy the people, you can kill the people, and you can rid them of their cultures and their past ways, but you cannot destroy these giant pyramids and in all of these places that are remnant. There's just too much of it, and that's how those things were able to survive to the light of a new day. And then we're really lucky that they were able to still be around to have those teachings. And of course, through the power of the eagle, the mighty Spanish conquistadors conquered all of the Americas, which was the heart of this Atlantean serpent wisdom. And I want to point out that if you think that these are heroes, consider the fact that with Cortez and Pizarro, Cortez of course conquered Mexico, and Pizarro conquered South America, the Inca in Peru. Montezuma, who was the ruler of the Aztec, was captured by Cortez and held for ransom, and Atahualpa was the head ruler of the Inca, was captured by Pizarro and held for ransom. And when they both got their ransoms, both of those leaders were executed, and then all the civilizations were then stampeded and then destroyed. And then all we have left are these remnants that we're trying to uncover right now today. The cleansing of the pagans and Gnostics by the eagle through the corrupted church was to destroy this legacy. And we can still see places left behind of this Gnostic pagan wisdom in places like Stonehenge, where they connect back to this lost connection to the stars and the universe that we once had. And so if go think of the word pagan, meaning any of these religions, any of these people who followed anything other than the predetermined Christianity and Catholic Church before these times, that's why the very idea of the pagans being targeted was such by all these different cultures, because they were the ones still protecting this knowledge. And my favorite example for this, and it's a really striking example, and I really encourage people to look into this themselves to see the truth. But the holiday that everyone celebrates vigorously, it's one of everyone's favorites, is St. Patrick's Day. And I want to give you a little information about St. Patrick's Day that's going to maybe blow your mind a little bit. In the early 17th century, St. Patrick, remember, everything has been inverted by the eagle. Many of these saints are actually just soldiers of the church. So if you think about it that way, St. Patrick kicked all the snakes out of Ireland, right? So that's the story of St. Patrick's Day. People don't know that, or they just see a leprechaun and drinking, and so they all get drunk, and that's how they portray the holiday. But the real truth behind it is that if you look at the geography of Ireland and you know anything about its relative latitude, you know that there are no snakes in Ireland, and there never have been. So if there are no snakes, and you look at the metaphor for what that really means, a lot of these things are simply metaphors that we have to understand. It just means pagans. So they were ridding the snakes out of Ireland, the pagans out of Ireland. You see that there is the evidence right there to the fact that the pagans have been the ones protecting the serpent snake knowledge. And then you can connect that all the way back to the very beginnings of Atlantis. And you can connect to all these civilizations that have been trying to protect it all along. And this represents simply one of the last remaining places up in Scotland and Ireland that had these people that were protected. And they were, of course, celebrating their domination and being kicked out of the country. If you look at the complexity and the sheer scale behind this, you gotta look at how the eagle has been able to control so many human civilizations. It should be pretty clear that the gods were simply just these Anunnaki higher beings who have been playing the great puppet masters of our history. At some point, we gotta decide if we want to actually take the reins of our own story and stop letting them dictate it for us. How many human lives need to be sacrificed by these war criminals of our evolution? To me, the value of a human life is the ultimate gift we have. Our consciousness provides us with every single possible means for us to reach the true light beings that we really are. And the value of a human life is what is at stake here. This serpent dragon knowledge, all it does is connect back to who we really are. connecting back to our chakra centers, and that identity is what's being fought over. Because if people don't know who they really are, they'll allow themselves to be ruled and governed, and they'll fight for another country and die for them. And once you learn the truth of it, everything really does change, because then you no longer are governed by those things any longer. Please find more about this in my book, The Illusion of Us. And I have a YouTube page, Rex mentioned. Thank you so much, Rex. I make a lot of videos like this. I continuously try to do a lot of different content to try to connect different parts, from both connecting back to thinking like spending time in the outdoors and Gaia, to everything to the Anunnaki and higher consciousness and dimensions. And I want to also say, I've learned so much, and a huge shout out to Gerald Clark, who's been a really huge inspiration and teacher for me behind this. And his website can be found at geraldclark77.com. So please look at a lot of these videos and some of these books that we've written, because we really have tried to expose this battle of the eagle and the serpent that's been held back for so long. Because this time of Aquarius that Thoth talks about how eventually mankind will be able to find this knowledge again. And that's the time we're in right now with Aquarius. That's been predicted by the Mayans and all of these cultures. And so this is the time when this information is flooding the internet and being released. And so it's just those who can look into themselves and have the courage to find the truth. So thank you very much.